So it's now 12 noon and we have a whole 4 people in the room and 12 people signed in to the Meet Echo, which is about approximately what I should expect, I think. So we'll give it 1 more minute and then we'll just start. We have, let me see. Here's Muthu, here's Martin. Let's see.
Oh yes, I'm not signed in yet.
Yep.
It's not on the screens.
I was trying to see if Manu is present. Just checking that we have all the presenters.
I'm now logged in.
Yeah. You're in the queue. But you have.
I'm out of queue. That's
Yeah.
the only way I can test to make sure I'm properly connected.
Yeah. Just wave your hand at the queue. Okay. So Manu will have to pick up when he arrives. I must admit that I have no idea, speaking of pronouns, whether Manu is a he or a she.
Who is?
Manu is Borny, the one that does the slides on multiple suffixes for media types, but I got that person's slides. I mean, in this context, it's the average person is the average person is likely to answer to he, but you never know. Yeah. So let's get started. This is the first face-to-face meeting of the, or face to some faces meeting of the Mediaman working group. We have a hopefully administrative task in front of us in deciding on how the rules should be to register top-level MIME types and other changes to the MIME type registration process, of which we have one specific proposal on the table in front of us. So standard procedure, if I can find the next slide button. Note well, you're running a meeting under IETF policy. If you don't understand everything on this slide, you have work in front of you. I somehow managed to get a template without the standards for good behavior slide on it, but I suppose you have seen all this already. Meeting tips for using Meet Echo. Remote participants, use of a headset is strongly recommended to reduce the chance of echo. And project when you need to. Some links if you need them. And here's our agenda. The general format is every presenter gets 5 minutes and then you have 10 minutes open for discussion. And in the end, we have 10 minutes for wrap up. We have 1 hour from 4 minutes ago. So, any comments on the agenda? Seeing nobody on the queue, I'll just hand it over to Martin for the new tuple types document. Just say next slide when I'm supposed to skip.
Okay, thanks, Harold. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so next slide. The first point I want to get across is that our current charter currently doesn't say that we have to create such a document, but we have to determine whether we need such a document. So keep that in mind. Okay, next slide. Well, after Harold twisted my arm and got me to become an editor for this draft, I just thought I would kind of go through and find all the documents that actually do define top-level media types. And here's what I found. RFC 207070 is not mentioned in the current draft, but Alex Melnikov sent me a mail and told me that that was the number that I needed. There's also a 1st of April one, and there's the haptics top-level proposal that we'll discuss later. And then I found a chemical top-level type that is not officially registered and that has a lot of X-hyphen types, subtypes in it. So these are just the examples that we can look at and think about what criteria that we want to define if we indeed want to define them. Okay, next slide. The base that we are working from is RFC 6838, which is media type specifications and registrations. And the pieces that are relevant for this work are section 4.2.5 and 4.2.7, and in particular the bolded pieces. Application media types can be used for anything that doesn't fit under any other types. Types always means top-level types, actually. And the additional top-level types should be quite rare, and they can be defined via standard track RFC. So the question is whether we need anything more than what we have already in this RFC. Next slide. This is mostly, well, kind of putting section 3 of my draft on a slide. This is just a collection of potential criteria that we could actually use. Well, one thing is that each the new top-level types should be rare, and therefore each probably needs separate consideration. And if there are a lot of types actually in the wild, that was the case for font and is the case now for chemical, that might be an indication of the need to actually formally define that top-level type. And also, on the other hand, undefined top-level types should be highly discouraged. Yeah. So these two, the last 2 points are a little bit in contrast to each other. Next slide.
Just, I forgot one important thing. Barry, can you take notes? Robert Stefanik takes notes.
Thanks, Robert.
Thanks a lot.
Just make sure you, if we decide anything, that you get it into the notes. Okay, let's go on.
Okay.
Apologies.
Then this lists the formal criteria, which standard stack RFC, we probably want to keep that, but we can, of course, discuss that. We need clear criteria for what belongs in the new top-level type and whatnot. we need some initial registrations. If there's just an idea for a new type with no actual types there, that's probably not going to work. In some document, I saw a mention of common parameters. That might be a plus for a new top-level type. And also the question is whether or not to use a working group to define a top-level type, and I think we should leave that open because we have seen in the past both examples. Okay, next slide. In terms of content, these are some
Mary had
things.
a question on the previous slide.
Oh, okay.
So this is Barry Leba. Can you flip the slide back, Harold? Thank you. I just want to make sure we don't just do that first bullet, standards track RFC, without thinking about it. As long as we're changing the rules for this, we might consider whether having new top-level types go through the expert reviewer rather than having to have standards track RFC. We may decide we want to keep the standards track RFC path, but I just want to make sure we don't just blow that off out of hand. Alexei, do you have a thought on that as one of the reviewers?
Yes, sorry, I need to log in and add myself to the queue. But yeah, I would rather keep it standards track. It should be high enough bar. They're so rare.
So let's try to take the discussion after the full presentation.
Yeah,
So
fine.
I just set a pin in it then.
Yeah. Okay. Back to the schedule. Sorry about.
Okay, on this slide, I put a few points that I found in previous definitions of top-level types. These previous definitions, like the font, like the model type, and so on, they have to kind of advertise, they have to advocate for this new type, and they bring forward various criteria. One thing that definitely, well, we have audio, we have image, we have video, and so we might in the future have something olfactory, but although the technology for that is maybe not ready yet. Also, whether some types have a temporal aspect or not, or a spatial aspect can affect that. Also, whether it's easy to convert within a type, a top-level type, than between top-level types. For example, it's easier to convert an audio format to an audio format than to an image, and so on. Also, the practice or need for dispatch on top-level types, and the existence of actual subtypes or potential subtypes might be criteria. And then, of course, type-specific criteria. But it's really these things are rare, and so we can find criteria like the ones I have listed, but we always have to be open for new stuff, I think. Okay, next slide. IANA considerations. What I discovered is that there's currently no registry for top-level types. There's a registry for subtypes that is organized by top-level types, but the documentation varies. For example, you can find that there's a model top-level type, but it's not possible from the registry to find where this is defined. Yeah. So maybe we have to tell IANA to organize this a slightly, tiny little bit better. At least have the type name and the defining RFC, maybe some other things. Okay, next slide. Okay, these are mostly notes to myself. in most cases, the documents speak about type and subtype, whereas it's easier to say top-level type to make it clear. Also, the questions whether top level should be with hyphen or without, and so on. But that's really details. Okay, next slide. Okay, and that's Harold's slide. That's actually not my slide. So back to Harold.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. So now, the question in front of the working group that we have to decide by the have to have an idea by the end of the segment is to whether to adopt this or not as a working group draft. And the content is of course subject to this discussion on all the individual points given and formats and formulations and everything that we do when we get a proper review of any draft. But the floor's open. Barry, you're first on the queue.
Okay, this is Barry Lieba. First, I'll go to the last point of do we need a media type registry? We do have it. At the beginning of the media types registry, there's a section that lists the sub-registries for each media type, for each top-level type. So we actually do have that in the registry. I think that's that point is not necessary to address at all. And so I want to get back to the
I think there is actually a minor subtle issue that it is in the registry, but that's what IANA created. There is actually no creation of the top level registry. So I think Martin's point about that knowing RFCs defining top level types is sometimes tricky is very true. I did find model for him and I emailed him, but it's like, this is because I already spent half an hour searching for it last time.
So, then I think all we may need to do is put a reference at the beginning here that has the RFC for each.
Just top level type and reference.
Yeah.
Yes, I think the question of whether there's a registry and we need to add something, or whether we need to create the registry with the things that we want, that's really a semantic question that doesn't really make any difference.
Right. It's a small issue. Yeah. So the other one is what I brought up before. My reason for saying we should think about, at least, is I'm looking at chemical as a thing. It's not anything we have any expertise over, whether that should be a top level registry or not. The IETF participants in general are not really steeped in whether a new media type should be created. It's the experts, you, Ned, Murray, who are the ones who really have a sense of that. And basically the IETF is going to do whatever you suggest. So why not just skip the whole standards track thing and let that go through the media types experts as well? And I'm ambivalent. I can go either way. I'm just bringing up the issue.
With my Alexei, with my media type expert hat on, sometimes experts need help. So I don't mind considering the question of registration procedure. That is fine. Possible tweak on it might be specification required, as in experts review. Specification needs to be written. Doesn't have to be IETF specification, but maybe with an escape clause saying that expert can request IETF review. I think that would be sensible. But coming back to the question about document adoption, I think we should. It's quite clear there are lots of open issues and things that are not, yet to be resolved. But I think, well, Martin did better job than anybody else of us, so he has a document. So I think we should adopt it.
Let's see.
One more random comment about possible criteria for the top level media types might be if all subtypes have a shared property or restriction. And I actually can give examples, like for text, for all text media types, they all have to be CRLF. Each line is CRLF. So if your charset encoding doesn't allow for that, it cannot be text media type. That's a restriction that is common for all of them.
Text RTF.
I think it still applies to that. The Thunderbird used to support UTF-16 variants for text, and I think they took it out because probably were told that you cannot do that.
Okay. I'm closing the queue after Alexei finishes, by the way.
And similar, like multipart has certain restrictions about what can be inside it, how it's formatted. So again, if there is a set of related things, they have common properties or common restrictions, that might be a criteria for top level.
Okay. Phil, keep it short.
So yes, we should adopt the draft. The principle that I think that we need to adopt here is permissionless innovation, so that anybody can get access to register any media type without having to kiss rings. But that only applies to the actual registration itself. When we're looking at the top level concerns, that's a matter of organization of the registry. It isn't a gating function. And so I think that it's entirely right and proper to have standards track required to reorganize for organization, so long as you don't have to kiss rings to get a registration.
Thank you. John?
Speaking with my non-existent hat as the author of, as co-author of one of the relevant documents here, it's been cleared in discussions in other topics in the last few weeks that that probably there is a problem with the standards track categorization and the next step there. Which is that requiring something beyond standards track actually involves two separate things. One of them is that the IESG, after listening to the type reviewers and waving its hands and running a last call, which often gets no response, goes ahead and blesses something. But the other is that it provides an opportunity for community input and response, community input and discussion. The media type reviewers are wonderful people. They have done a great job, but they are not experts in all possible fields which might be covered by top level types. And forcing the opportunity for a community discussion on those things, if only to inform them, but under the current procedures, there's no way to do that, so it's inform the ISG, is actually a valuable contribution to this process. So until and unless we revise the categories of approval for top level categories of approval for any IANA registry, we're better off leaving the top level types as standards track, even if the ISG action is a little bit pro forma. Thanks.
Thank you. Murray?
I also support standards track for most of the reasons given. I think John said more elegantly than what I was about to say, which is, as a media type reviewer for something big like this, I would prefer the air cover of, making sure that I'm not making a mistake by approving a top level type. So I also support adoption of the document. Thank you, Martin, for putting it together.
Thank you. We're at the end of the queue. And Phil, Phil, do you feel strong need to have a last remark? No, drop out. So I'm hearing consensus for adopting the document. I'm hearing a strong preponderance of speakers who are in favor of using standards track for as a gating criterion for new tuple types. And I don't think there's any reason to run a poll on this. We should confirm it on the list, but let's assume that this
I'll
is
just
a
throw in that
decision.
I'm good with that decision. I just wanted to make sure we discussed it.
Yep. Okay. So we have now a driving example of Muthosami's haptics draft as the first candidate to be processed on the process we decide on. Muthosami, are you there?
I'm here.
Let me see. Grant preloaded slides. So you now have permission to you should now have permission to show your slides.
Okay, I'm trying to do just that. Give me just a minute. Let me share. I'm trying to get used to the Meeteco sharing tool here. Just a second.
Yeah.
How do I make my slide set visible through Meeteco? It says I can share, but
You can pass it on.
Okay. So let me see. I'm also not used to Meeteco.
okay. I don't feel so bad right now.
Yeah. So pass slide control. There it is. All the slots for the requested media are already taken. Boom. Let's see.
So I just stop sharing the slides.
No, you can just pass control.
Yeah, you should be able to pass control. Well, if it says that only his data.
Whatever that means.
No, that's his end is saying only his data, but if he's got an.
Oh, it says change deck. Do I change the deck which is currently being shown? It seems that.
Yes.
Go ahead. Do that.
Yes, do that.
Okay, there you go. All right.
Yep.
Choose a deck to share. Agenda slides. Okay. Are you able to see this?
Yes.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Harold. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Yashwant Muthusamy. So what has happened since the last time since the time that I uploaded version 00 of the Mediaman draft for haptics? In MPEG, the ISO BMFF 7th edition was approved and published in January of 2022, and that is significant because in that we specify haptic tracks as a top level media track at the same level as audio and video. And in MPEG, the haptics phase 1 codec standard is making good progress towards its first ballot, which is expected in October of 2022. In MPEG-I, which is immersive media scene description, the haptics phase 2 use cases and requirements have been approved. These are those which pertain to XR and avatars and interactivity, and work is underway to define the 3 haptics related extensions to GLTF, which is a framework used in scene description. Just an update on what has happened since I uploaded the Mediaman haptics draft. And in IETF itself, thanks to Martin, we just went through the top level draft. And from our reading, we believe that the haptics in internet draft does indeed satisfy all the criteria that were listed in section 3. And in the rest of this presentation, I'm going to be going into a little bit deeper into how the draft does do that. So with that, just a quick recap of the basics, since I haven't seen much traffic on the haptics draft on the media types list. Haptics refers to the generation of touch-related sensations in a device or interface. It's widely used in a variety of consumer devices to provide touch feedback.
And the haptic technologies require some form of actuation to create a tactile sensation in smaller devices like mobile phones or controllers. These are typically small vibrating motors. If you go to large automotive touchscreens, the actuators are specialized piezoelectric materials. And haptic capabilities are now part of every modern smartphone, gaming and VR controller, the most prominent of which is the Sony PS5 DualSense controller. Okay, so going right down into the criteria that Martin had listed. So I list each criteria, and the parts in blue is our response or our understanding of how the haptics internet draft does indeed meet that criterion. So the new top level types are rare enough and different enough that each application needs to be evaluated separately. We believe that the haptics top level type is unlike any of the top level types that are currently recognized by IETF, and it is different enough to merit top level status for all the reasons that we mentioned in our draft. And it needs to be documented in a standards track RFC, and that is indeed the intended status of our draft. It should include initial registrations of the actual types. As soon as our draft is approved, we do plan to register the actual types which are currently defined in the draft, and may or may not need a working group. Well, we are talking about it right now in this working group. The existence of a certain number of subtypes would be grouped under the new top level type. At a minimum, at least one subtype should exist, but the existence of one subtype is not enough. None of these subtypes that you see here have actually been registered yet. I just want to make that clear, but they have been described in section 2.5 of the haptics draft. For example, we talk about these potential subtypes which are actually very widely in use right now. For example, AHAP is the standard encoding on all iOS devices and iOS connected game peripherals. OGG is a proprietary extension to the OGG format to store haptic media that made its debut in Android 11. IVS is an XML-based vendor-specific format that's used in many mobile phones from LG and gaming phones from ASUS. And HAPT is also a vendor-specific format that's used in mobile haptic advertising and certain Japanese games. In addition, in section 2.6 of our draft, we envision in a number of haptic subtypes as part of the various haptic standards, which are in various stages of standardization. The HMPG, which would be the MPEG Haptics Phase 1 codec standard, which as I mentioned, is likely to go into CD ballot in October of this year. The HIEE, which is the IEEE P1918.1.1 vibrotactile coding standard that is currently under IEEE SA ballot. And then the last two are subtypes that we are planning to register, which is based on enumerated effects haptic coding format that's based on MIDI, and the audio to vibe haptic coding format. So there are a number of existing haptic subtypes which can be registered under this new type. Sorry, let me go to the next slide. Just making sure. Okay. I seem to have missed a page here. Sorry about that. Okay. Now, existing use of an undefined top-level type might be indication of a need, but then, of course, use of undefined top-level types is highly discouraged. No undefined top-level haptic types are currently in use, as far as we can tell. Top-level types mostly help humans. It is unclear to what extent top-level types can be used by applications and therefore evaluating how a new top-level type helps humans understand types may be crucial. The only point we want to make here is that the proposed haptic top level type pertains to the human sense of touch, just as the existing audio, video top level types pertain to the senses of hearing and vision, respectively. Moving on to the next one, which I believe is my
Martin,
last
did
slide.
you want to interrupt?
Do I go on or do I wait for Martin?
I don't want to interrupt. Sorry.
Okay, okay, you're first in the queue. Go
Okay.
on.
All right. I'm almost done here. So, need for clear criteria for what types do and don't fall under the new top level type. Any subtype that deals with one of the haptic submodalities, which are described in the draft, which is vibrotactile, kinesthetic, spatial, surface, or the thermal haptics, is a clear candidate for inclusion under the haptics top level type. As far as the desirability for common parameters is concerned, all data formats which are in the haptics ID, which pertain to the sense of touch, would need to be under the proposed haptics top level type. And another feature that is common to all of these haptic subtypes is that they all would require a haptic subsystem, such as low-level haptics APIs, which in turn would require hardware capabilities, such as one or more actuators in the device, as I mentioned earlier, to actually render the haptics media. So those are the common features you look for when you are trying to make a decision. With that brings me to the end of my main presentation. If you notice on the slides, I have a whole bunch of backup slides which are meant for the audience to go through or go over on their own time, but I included them because of the relative novelty of this top level type. But I'm happy to take any questions at this point.
Okay, Martin, you're first on the queue.
Yes, thanks for Yeshwant to kind of compare his new type with my criteria, but I think I just wanted to say we have to be careful to know who is the dog and who is the tail. I mean, my draft isn't even yet working group draft, and I'm not claiming that my criteria are complete or they are any of them are necessary. So we have to be careful. If, for example, if you're a type, there's some criteria that we find that can help, or that you don't qualify, then we have to look at the criteria and maybe fix them. Anyway, I just wanted to say that we have to, it's not that I'm going to define the criteria and you just have to follow. It's actually maybe the other way around or so.
Sure. Fair point. If I might quickly respond. I mean, your point is well taken, Martin, but this is all I had to go. This is all I had to go by. And it also helped that your draft preceded mine in the presentation sequence. So I was taking advantage of that. But your point is taken.
Thank you. Phil.
Yeah, taking a point that John made in the last discussion and applying it here, it occurs to me that one of the very useful areas for reasons for having different top level types is going to be the ADs may want to assign different experts according to top level type. And that is likely to be exceptionally useful in a case like this, where you've got, the whole haptic field is going to be something that needs quite a bit of expertise. If you're going to avoid ambiguity or multiple issues of, issue of multiple code points to the same specification or whatever. And so, I think that this is definitely along the right lines. It definitely needs a separate top level type, because this is not, it's not like application where everything's different and you're never going to get coherence. It's not like anything we've done before. And you're going to need expertise to understand this is a rapidly changing environment and a moving target. And so moving into the new own thing does make sense to me.
Thank you, Phil. Murray.
Just responding to Martin quickly, I think we have an advantageous situation here where we're defining both the standards track document that's going to explain how you create a top level type, and then a first case coming along with it, developing them in parallel and shipping them both to the IESG at the same time is perfectly fine. And I think that moving the two of them together is going to work pretty well.
John?
Yeah, I want to be careful that we don't invent too much procedure here, because it just gets in the way and slows things down. So two observations, one of which is that we'd have to ask the current set of reviewers. But my guess is, based upon when I was actually involved in the reviewer process, that that decisions as to who gets to review which application are partially based on who knows something about it. And if that's not true, we can go off and formalize it, but I don't think it would accomplish anything. It does imply something which has gotten involved in the pre-working group haptics discussion, and is consistent with what Phil said, which is that implicitly the requirement for a new top-level type is we figure out who reviews it. And if that means tuning the reviewer process, that's fine. If that means that we may have to add a reviewer for each top-level type, that's fine. But I don't know that we need to tie ourselves up in new procedures for this, or maybe we do. Thanks.
Thanks. I think that the problem of whether or not to allow for multiple reviews actually comes back to the top level type discussion. And no, actually it doesn't. It comes to another point, which is the possible redesign of the registration procedures for subtypes, because after all, reviewer is part of the subtype. Okay, I think we have exhausted this topic for the moment. And we seem to have found no new reasons why haptics is a bad idea. So, some compelling arguments for why it's a good idea. So we'll just have to wait a little bit until we get the rest of the stuff fixed up so that we can actually move those documents forward. I'll then pass the token again to Manu.
Hi, Harald. Can you hear my audio?
I can hear your audio.
Wonderful. Hello, everyone. My name's Manu Sporny. I'm the editor of a couple of specifications over at the W3C, JSON LD, decentralized identifiers, and verifiable credentials. And that work kind of spawned the need for the Mediaman suffixes work. Really quickly, going to cover today some of the goals for Mediaman suffixes, the changes made since the last time we met, some topics of concern that have come up in the past couple of months since December, and then see what the group feels are the appropriate next steps. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are the goals here? We're trying to establish how multiple media type suffixes should be processed. So if you get a message with media type with multiple suffixes, what should you be able to do with that? So this question was brought up by media types like image / SVG plus XML plus gzip. In application / did plus LD plus JSON, anything that has multiple plus signs in it when we went to register these media types, the ones with multiple plus signs, the registration, folks processing the registration were like, well, what exactly does that mean, right? So that's what we're trying to answer with this document. We're trying to establish registration policies for media types with multiple suffixes. That's the problem that the verifiable credentials working group at W3C hit when they tried to register, or they were thinking of registering, their media type with multiple plus signs. Same thing with the decentralized identifier working group. And it looks like we're just getting more media types that have multiple suffixes in them. We also want to provide some security considerations when processing media types with multiple suffixes, and I'll get into that here in a bit. But these are, I think, the high-level goals that I heard the working group said that they were interested in establishing in this draft. Next slide, please. Okay, so what changes have we made since the last time we met? The old processing model in the draft that was submitted to the working group was just broken. It worked for things in application / but it did not work for image / SVG plus XML plus gzip. So the prose has been rewritten. We've added a few examples to demonstrate what how you should think about processing media types with multiple suffixes. And the new prose basically, I believe, works with all of the media types, multiple suffix media types that are under consideration today. Third change that was made is there was a structured syntaxes suffixes registry. This is not my area of expertise, and I had no idea that registry existed. But the fact that that registry exists is really useful. And the existence of that registry and using it to do processing has been included in the latest draft. And finally, a security consideration section has been added because there's at least one attack that we've identified that people need to be aware of when they build tooling that processes media types with multiple suffixes. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are the current topics of concern? This is really what we need feedback on from the working group and participants. There still hasn't been enough review, and I'm struggling to figure out how to get that review. I know that people have said things in the past, and they haven't spoken up recently, so I'm thinking of just like trying to get them on the phone and talking through the draft with them. I think it'd be good to engage folks like Ned because he did write the multiple suffixes registry thing. I don't think he's provided feedback yet. Other people have done reviews. So thank you to Murray and others that have provided input. But I'm wondering if we should be more targeted and I should just go after people that should have opinions about this, people that have written drafts in this particular orbit. The other question I have is, I don't know if the new processing model is correct. I don't know if it matches other people's mental model, and would really appreciate some feedback on that. There's a link to the new processing model from the slides there. And then finally, there's this new security consideration section. One of the things people were concerned about was this concept of what happens if someone sending you the media type lies to you on purpose to try and trick your tool chain into doing something weird, like bypassing some kind of security scanning process, by un-gzipping something and then sending the resulting value directly to an application instead of sending it through like a virus checker or something like that. I'm grasping at straws for that attack, but I'm trying to establish that people need to think about that. Harold, you also raised another, I think maybe another attack in an email, but when I went to write it up, I got confused about whether or not you were talking about the media type fibbing attack or if there was another one. So I'd appreciate some feedback on other security considerations, other ways that things can go wrong with processing multiple suffixes. Okay, so those are the topics of concern. Would appreciate some feedback on each one of those items during discussion. Next slide. Okay, so what are the next steps? Concrete things, I'd like to maybe interview Ned and Murray. I'd like some feedback from you. And clearly anyone else, Martin, would appreciate some feedback if you have any. And I know that Mark Nottingham said at one point he thought the spec was a bad idea, and so I'd like to chase him down and see if he still thinks that. Then revise the spec based on that, and then I'm wondering about a finalization timeline. There's no real rush, but there are multiple W3C working groups that are just in a holding pattern right now. In fact, the working groups have shut down, and they're just like, well, I guess we'll register the media type whenever the multiple suffix thing is handled. So we've got at least 3 different specs there that are waiting to register their media types on this spec, and it would be good to kind of understand where the group feels we are on, finalization. That's it, Harold. Back over to you.
Thank you. Now, mic is open. I put myself in the mic queue. Speaking as participant, the fibbing attack has been one of the more successful delivery methods for viruses carried over email. So it's not hypothetical. It's very, very real. The other thing I was thinking of when reading through your security section is that it needs to say explicitly that when you're doing unpacking, you have to consider security for all the levels. For instance, there's a well-known attack on gzip, which is called a gzip bomb, where you just provide certain primitives in gzip that expand to a file of a near infinite size. And if you just blindly unpack anything without proper guards against such things, then you will be sorry. So that's just another few words in the security section should take care of that. And John.
Yeah, just to follow up on that before getting to the point I wanted to make. It's also true, whether you classify it as a security problem or not, that sometimes lying on media types is a problem as well, and occurs inadvertently, but is no less disruptive. And if people need examples of that, contact me offline, and I will send you an appropriate message. But the other observation is, and I don't know if there's anything useful to be said about it now or done with it now, but back at the dawn of time, when RFC 1590 was written, my recollection is that we had a brief discussion about structured subtypes. And we came to the conclusion the right solution was parameters and not structured subtypes, because structured subtypes led to precisely the slippery slope, confusion, multiple suffixes example, which was given at the beginning of this talk. And I don't know how much further we want to go down this path. This is a problem that we failed to deal with at the time that media types became a mail and web and maybe other things thing rather than a mail thing, a process we didn't bring the parameter stuff over. But my concern is that we're moving down a path as we go from one suffix to multiple suffixes and possibly questions about which suffixes are more important than which other suffixes, in which we really dig ourselves into a hole and then reach out for a bigger shovel. And I don't know the solution.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Martin, you have the last word.
I just wanted to say that it wasn't totally clear to me whether you actually, when there's a registry of suffixes, the question is whether we also need a registry of suffix combinations or not. And also the question whether we then register subtypes that include the fixed combination of suffixes that they can be used with, or whether this is just some kind of, well, if I attach, for example, a gzip plus gzip somewhere, it just means it's gzipped and it's whatever is inside. So how permissionless do we want to be there or not? I don't know, but I think that's something that we should explicitly discuss and decide on. That's it.
Yes. So we have, thank you. So we have 4 minutes left on our agenda. So we'll just have to say, please, please, please review this document and attach comment, send comments. The question of what needs to be registered in order to do this multi-level processing is a very key one. We might decide that we have to register all legal combinations, so we might have to decide that we have to register only the suffixes and say nothing about which types they can be used with, or we might come down on some alternative. I mean, is text/plain plus gzip legal MIME type? No, at the moment it's not, but will it be after we approve this document? Yeah. So that's we have to, I don't know if the answer is yes or no, but I know that the document has to give a clear answer. Yeah. Okay. We have now gone through these 3 documents. We have 3 minutes left. I have one thing listed under any other business, which means it came up on the mailing list, which is that if we choose to open up 6838 for revision, which is another thing that the working group has to decide, should we drop the MAC file types from the forms that people fill out, given that most people don't have any idea? I'm unlocking the queue again now. Martin.
If we don't open the 6838 for revision, but the fact that now, if it gets confirmed on the mailing list, if my document goes forward, it's already doing an update of 6838. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Alexei.
Yeah, Alexei. Not sure about the whole reopening thing. That might be a bit process heavy, but as far as MAC types is concerned, I kind of tend to defer completely to Ned on this because he's a Mac user. He has more. I wouldn't like to take it out until he comments, and I know at the moment he's not available. So,
Pete, also a Mac user.
Yes, Pete Resnick, and it's been a long time since I've coded on the Mac, but as far as I know, the Mac file types are completely deprecated on the Mac. It's using file extensions now. So I think there is no new thing, but I think there may still be legacy support for the old Mac types, but it's legacy support. It's certainly not used underneath. So I don't think there's any point in having them on the form. We could leave a space for notes, and people can include that information if for legacy purposes they think they need to, but I don't think it should be a requirement of the form anymore.
I think they're gone with OS 10. OS 10's been out for so many years.
Right, and Barry said he thinks they're gone with OS 10 and it's been out for so many years. I believe in the original go-round of OS 10, they still existed underneath, but all of the operating system stuff uses the file extensions now and not those underneath things. So I like I said, I think it's perfectly reasonable to deprecate and put it in notes someplace in the form.
Thank you. With that, we're at the end of our agenda. And I will just say, we have one action item decided on, or we want the top level document to be adopted by the working group. We'll confirm that on the list. We have one strong indication of preference that the document should say that standards track is an appropriate level bar. Whether we have more words on that, we should discuss on the mail list.
Yeah, I think it's already in the document we're going to adopt, and
Yep.
we'll discuss it as part of that.
Yep. Okay. I will just say thank you very much and see you on the mailing list. The meeting is now closed.
Now next door to Ohio.
Hi. Yes.
Not the first time I have been Skype. You might want to look at the document. I think that have almost everything. I only had a hard time understanding John. I don't